Imagine you're standing in a quiet laboratory, looking at a human skull that's been waiting nearly 7,000 years to tell its story. At first, nothing seems unusual. Then your eyes catch something impossible, a clean, almost perfect opening near the top. Not a crack, not an injury. Someone made that hole on purpose. But that's not the shocking part. The edges are smooth. The bone healed. Whoever this person was, they survived. An archaeologist turns the skull over and asks a question that sounds almost absurd. Someone deliberately opened this person's skull, and they survived. Wait, how? How do you perform brain surgery before anyone knows what a neuron is? Before bacteria have even been imagined? Before anesthesia, sterile instruments, or modern medicine? Most people assume ancient brain surgery was nothing more than luck. The evidence suggests otherwise. The greatest mystery isn't that ancient humans dared to open the skull. It's that they somehow learned how to keep people alive afterward. And once you see that, a bigger question appears. Why was our species the only one that ever crossed that line? Every animal knows something about healing. A chimpanzee licks a wound. An elephant helps an injured companion stand again. Some ants even carry wounded nestmates back to the colony instead of abandoning them. Care, compassion, cooperation. Those aren't uniquely human. So why didn't any other species invent surgery? The answer isn't stronger hands. It isn't a bigger brain. It's something much easier to miss. Memory. Not your memory. Our memory. Researchers estimate that every generation inherited more than genes. It inherited experience. One successful treatment became a story. That story became a lesson. The lesson became tradition. And tradition can survive long after the people who created it are gone. Imagine watching someone save a life, then teaching another child exactly what worked and exactly what failed. That's when healing becomes something more than instinct. Evolution didn't need better hands. It needed a better memory, shared by an entire community. To understand how this happened, don't look for the first surgeon. Look for the first apprentice. Researchers estimate that somewhere between 100,000 and 70,000 years ago, human language reached a turning point. Words stopped being simple warnings. They became a way to store experience. Imagine a young apprentice sitting beside an elder for years. Not weeks. Years. Watching every careful movement. Watching which plants eased pain. Watching where to cut and where never to cut. Watching one patient recover. Watching another die. There were no anatomy books. No medical schools. No one explaining neurons, infection, or blood pressure. People simply remembered what worked. Then they practiced it. Then they passed it on. Not instinct. Tradition. Not DNA. Shared experience. Every mistake became a warning. Every success became a lesson. Parents taught children. Elders taught apprentices. Over countless generations, those lessons slowly became more refined than any one person could have discovered alone. Your genes can build a human brain. Only culture can teach that brain how to heal another. Brains evolve slowly. Traditions move much faster. And that difference may have changed the future of our species. Now let's return to the evidence. Fossil records suggest archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of ancient skulls showing unmistakable signs of trepanation. Some contain small circular openings. Others are square or oval. But the shape isn't what matters. The healing is. Bone only repairs itself if the person survives. The edges become smooth. New bone begins to grow. Researchers estimate that some patients lived for months after the operation. Others may have survived for years. Think about everything hidden inside that fact. Someone believed the operation was worth attempting. Someone had enough skill to perform it. Someone cared for the patient afterward. And the patient lived. Wait, that shouldn't happen if this were only random ritual. If trepanation was nothing more than superstition, why do healed skulls appear in different places, separated by centuries? Why do distant communities leave behind the same biological evidence of survival? The bones never tell us what happened. They don't have to. Bones don't exaggerate. Bones don't invent legends. They simply record whether life continued. Of course, not every operation succeeded. No medical tradition ever has. But successful recoveries happened often enough to leave a pattern that researchers can still recognize today. Success leaves evidence. This time, it was written in bone. Stories disappear. Bones remember. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The people performing these operations had never heard the word neuron. They knew nothing about electrical signals, brain chemistry, or microscopic cells. Yet their techniques slowly became better. How? Not because one genius figured everything out. Because entire communities learned together. Imagine the first generation trying something no one had attempted before. Maybe they cut too deep. Maybe they chose the wrong tool. Maybe the patient didn't survive. The next generation remembered. They avoided one mistake. Then another. Then another. Little by little, failure became instruction. No single person understood the whole picture, but each generation added one small piece to it. Someone discovered a cleaner cut. Someone noticed a safer place on the skull. Someone found a plant that eased pain just enough to make the procedure possible. No laboratories. No scientific journals. No modern medicine. Just observation. Memory. Repetition. Science explains why something works. Culture remembers that it works. Those are two different kinds of intelligence. One uncovers truth. The other protects it. Long before medicine could explain the brain, human culture had already learned lessons the brain itself would only explain thousands of years later. Culture can discover truths long before science explains them. Now compare that with the rest of the animal kingdom. Chimpanzees comfort injured companions. Elephants have been seen supporting herd members that struggle to stand. Dolphins sometimes lift exhausted pod members toward the surface so they can breathe. They help. They protect. They care. Those behaviors are remarkable. But they stop there. No chimpanzee spends decades teaching another how to perform a precise procedure. No elephant develops a technique that becomes safer generation after generation. No dolphin leaves behind a tradition that someone born a century later can improve. Why? Because healing is biological. Surgery is cultural. Compassion may begin the process. Shared memory finishes it. That's the line humans crossed. Not because we suddenly became smarter. Not because evolution handed us magical brains. But because every generation inherited more than life. It inherited experience. Then it added something new before passing it forward again. That's what turns simple care into medicine, and medicine into civilization. If you're still with me, subscribe, because the next part changes the story completely. Ancient brain surgery wasn't humanity's greatest achievement. The way we learned from failure was. There's one detail we can't ignore. Not every trepanation ended with a survivor. Fossil records suggest some skulls show no signs of healing at all. Some people almost certainly died during or shortly after the procedure. And in certain cultures, opening the skull may have carried spiritual meaning as much as medical purpose. The truth is, we don't know the intention behind every operation. So does that mean the entire practice was nothing more than ritual? Not necessarily. Wait, failure leaves evidence too. Every unsuccessful attempt taught a community what not to repeat. Every patient who survived revealed something worth remembering. Slowly, generation after generation, useful ideas stayed while harmful ones faded away. Not perfection. Progress. Not certainty. Adaptation. That's how cumulative knowledge works. It doesn't erase mistakes. It learns from them. Failure wasn't the opposite of progress. It was the force that pushed progress forward. So maybe humans were simply born smarter than every other species. It sounds like the obvious answer. It just isn't the right one. Imagine taking the smartest person alive today and placing them completely alone. No language, no teachers, no books, no inherited knowledge. Would that person invent brain surgery from scratch? Probably not. Because intelligence by itself isn't enough. Knowledge has to outlive the people who discover it. That's the real difference. One human mind has limits. Thousands of connected minds, spread across generations, don't. Every healer began with someone else's experience. Every apprentice started one step higher than the generation before. No one had to rebuild everything from the beginning. Researchers estimate that this accumulation of culture allowed human societies to change far faster than biological evolution ever could. Not a better brain. A better system for passing knowledge from one brain to the next. That's why ancient brain surgery matters. It isn't proof that our ancestors fully understood the brain. It's proof they understood something even more powerful. How to keep learning together. Human intelligence is cumulative, not individual. And that's where this story quietly becomes your story. Think about your own life. You can read because countless people shaped written language before you were born. You can drive because generations of engineers solve problems you'll never have to face. You use a smartphone, write code, tie your shoes, or take medicine because someone else spent years making mistakes so you wouldn't have to. You didn't invent any of those things. Yet every one of them lives inside your everyday routine. Not because you're extraordinary on your own, because humanity remembers together. Imagine if every generation had to start from zero. Every child would have to rediscover fire. Every healer would repeat the same deadly mistakes. Every civilization would spend its entire history climbing the same hill again and again. But that's not the world you inherited. You woke up inside thousands of generations of accumulated experience. You're carrying more than your own memories. You're carrying humanity's memory. Now return to that ancient skull one last time. A single opening. Smooth edges. Healed bone. At the beginning of this story, it looked like proof of an impossible operation. Now it means something far greater. It's evidence that knowledge can survive the people who first discovered it. Researchers estimate that millions of species have lived on Earth. Countless animals evolved sharper claws, faster legs, stronger jaws, or bigger brains. Only one species discovered how to preserve ideas long enough for strangers, separated by centuries, to improve them. Only one species slowly learned enough to study the organ that made learning possible in the first place. That's the paradox. The human brain gradually learned to understand itself because generation after generation refused to let knowledge disappear. Every healed skull is more than an archaeological discovery. It's a message sent across thousands of years. A reminder that what makes us human isn't simply intelligence. It's intelligence that keeps growing. If this changed the way you see your own mind, subscribe and join us for the next journey into what makes our species unlike any other. The brain learned itself through us. Subscribe.